Oh my God, so much has happened this morning. I don't know where to start. I guess I'll start with, I think in chronological order, the announcement that Trump is going to trial August 14th, if I remember correctly, 2023. So what's that, like 8 weeks from now? We're in mid-June, and actually we're kind of in the latter half of June, but still kind of mid-ish June. We've got over a week left in June, and then mid-August, Trump is going to be in trial. So hope he's got a good defense prepared. Hope he's got good lawyers. Hope his lawyers don't chicken out in the next 8 weeks, and then he has to start from scratch with a new defense. Because good luck finding a lawyer who's going to be willing to represent you, Trump. From what we've seen in the past, lawyers who try to represent Trump get disbarred. They get forced to turn over privileged communication to the feds, which, if you're a lawyer and you're handing over privileged communication to the feds, your future clients are not going to trust you. So that kind of shoots you in the foot for having a future legal profession, because people go, you know what? The feds were able to get your privileged communications between you and a previous client, so I don't think I want to have you as my lawyer, because I can't trust that what I say to you is going to be kept secret from the feds. As far as I know, you're going to turn it all over to them. Because these Trump lawyers, these ex-Trump lawyers, it's not like they put up a fight. The feds said, hey, tell us everything that you know, that Trump told you in confidence. And those lawyers, they coughed it right up. They said, here's everything. Trump's guilty. He told me. He said it right here. And the prosecutors went, aha, we've got you, Trump. Your own lawyers say you're guilty. And so Trump had to go out and scramble, find new lawyers. And let's just say that when Trump is hiring these people, he's not hiring America's best. In fact, I can't think of any case in which Trump has hired the best person for the job in the country, even though he has had the pick of the litter. The only person who, in Trump's whole political career, that I remember being excited about him hiring was Andy Puzder, who was going to be the labor secretary. He was the CEO of Hardee's, and I'm a big Hardee's fan. I also like Andy Puzder. He's a good no-nonsense businessman. He used to threaten employees if they wanted to go on strike for $15 an hour. He would just threaten to replace them with kiosks. And I like that he did that publicly. He didn't pretend to care. He understood, hey, they have one set of interests, I have a different set of interests, and, let's just all be out in the open about that. Well, guess what? Trump pulled his nomination. So he almost picked Andy Puzder to be labor secretary and then backed off. So after that, I can't say I liked any of Trump's appointments to anything. I don't think he's hired anybody who's particularly good. Obviously, he has hired the best lawyers. In fact, he has lawyers who, within months of him hiring them, he declares them to be enemies months later. It's like, okay, if these people all of a sudden are your enemies and they're, MAGA traitors, then that would make me think, I don't think that all these people are just, flip-flopping. I think that they probably were not your friend to begin with. They probably were not a good hire. But anyway, that's getting in the weeds. The big point is here, we've got a month till Trump's trial. Now, is there a chance that he gets off on these charges in the Florida trial? Well, sure, because Florida is going to be a more fair jury pool. And so there's a chance that they don't convict. Although, if Trump is convicted of really any one of these charges, he will die in prison. He's not going to last. These are all felonies, and they, I think each one carries up to 10 years in prison. And the minimums, I think, are like 3 or 4 years on most of these. So they're trying to pull an Irwin Schiff on Trump. Irwin Schiff, for those of you who don't know, he was a great dissident against the regime in Washington, and they locked him up when he was in his 80s, and he died of cancer in prison and was unable, or was not allowed to have any family at his deathbed. So he died alone, chained, handcuffed to a hospital bed. That was the fate of Irwin Schiff. And Irwin Schiff was nowhere near as important as Trump. In fact, most people have never heard of Irwin Schiff. They just thought that Irwin Schiff's message was far too powerful and far too dangerous. So they had to punish him severely because he advocated people not paying their taxes. Trump is a much bigger threat than Irwin Schiff certainly ever was, and so if they were willing to murder Irwin Schiff that way, chain him as he died of cancer to a hospital bed and refuse him last rites, refuse him any family visitors, let him die alone, they will do all that and more to someone as dangerous as Donald J. Trump. And as if this wasn't, this didn't send enough of a message that they're fast-tracking his trial, which, normally I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to have a fair and speedy trial. Of course, this Florida trial will be the fairest of all the Trump trials, at least I think. But anyway, they're fast-tracking his trial. The sooner Trump goes to trial, the sooner he will be locked away for life in prison. Within, I think, like an hour of this being announced, it was also announced, oh yeah, Hunter Biden, all that stuff with the laptop, with the pictures of him, weighing out crack on a scale, the videos of him smoking crack, all of the interactions between him and the hookers, whatever may or may not have gone on with him and his niece, the millions of dollars in potential money laundering that was funneled through him, but was intended more to buy off his father, from what we understand. His crazy international business life in places like Ukraine and China. His relationship with the Chinese spy chief. All this stuff, all the potential crimes connected to it, both suspected and proven, have all been resolved. His legal troubles are almost behind him. Thankfully, they're getting, they're getting finished with the Hunter stuff way in advance of the 2024 election, so it won't be something that Trump can dredge up and try and use against Joe Biden and say, oh, your corrupt son, he's a criminal. No, it's all been resolved. He's been totally exonerated, and he is going to plea down to a couple of tax charges. Apparently, he didn't pay enough in taxes, and so that's what the big crime that Hunter Biden is going to plea to, and so they're going to let him off on everything else. And so the cherry on top here is that this was a Trump-appointed prosecutor, which just tells you, again, Trump hires the best people. He hired the guy who gave Jeffrey Epstein his sweetheart deal. Was it Alex Azar? No, Alex Acosta. I think it was Alex Acosta who gave Jeffrey Epstein his sweetheart deal, who basically let Jeffrey Epstein off scot-free for all of his terrible misdeeds and for running a pedo ring. After doing that, Trump looked at him and said, you know what? I need to make that man a member of my cabinet. And I think he ended up being Labor's secretary, now that I think about it. Because Andy Puzder, oh my gosh, he's way too controversial. We need the Epstein prosecutor in here. But anyway, so another guy who Trump appointed to be a prosecutor, he has just cut this deal with Hunter. Hunter's getting off scot-free. And so the narrative, obviously, is that, look, Hunter Biden, he's so innocent, he's so clean, not even an ultra-MAGA Trump prosecutor could find a way to lock him up, even though the entirety of the Trump movement wanted Hunter to die in jail. They wanted to put Hunter away for life in prison. This Trump prosecutor, the best he could come up with, the best that he could prove, the most that he could get old Hunter on, was a couple of tax charges, which, in Irwin Schiff's case, him not paying his taxes led to him spending the rest of his life in prison and dying alone, chained to a hospital bed. But for Hunter, it looks like it's just going to be 2 years probation for not paying his taxes. I guess intent is the big thing here. It usually is with tax law. You see, Hunter, he tried to be a good boy. He's just a crack addict, and so he didn't really know what he was doing when he was filing his tax returns. Irwin Schiff was sober and very intelligent, and so they knew that when he didn't pay his taxes correctly, that it was 100% intentional and malicious. And so Irwin Schiff, life in prison. Hunter Biden, 2 years probation. Donald Trump, life in prison. Hunter Biden, 2 years probation. Oh, and the gun charge for buying a gun when he was a convicted felon, which, we're all told, oh my gosh, it's so bad. Felons can never be allowed to own guns. If you're convicted of, mail fraud, you're never allowed to own a gun because you're a dangerous person. Mail fraud, very dangerous. But Hunter, who's a crack addict, who seemed to have a very uncomfortable relationship, or at least a scary relationship with his niece. A niece whose mother eventually forbid Hunter from seeing because she was afraid of having Hunter around her children. Anyway, needless to say, this is not a coincidence. This is not ironic. There's no irony here. This is the point. The point is, if you're on the wrong side, you get life in prison. If you're on the right side, you get away with murder. Although, that's kind of a bad analogy, because in my opinion, every president, including Trump, is guilty of murder because of the illegal wars in places like Yemen. But that's beside the point here. They're not charging Trump with war crimes. If they were, I might be able to get behind it. No, they're charging Trump with crimes against the word. So needless to say, this will be the trial of the century. That is until the next Trump trial. Honestly, at this point, I'm kind of rooting for him to get convicted of something sooner rather than later, because once a terminal Trump conviction is handed down, that's kind of when things kick into high gear and it gets real for a lot of people. And it's like, they're not going to let Trump run for president. What do we do now? That's when I think, because I think that they will probably eventually. I mean, any of these things, there's four. There's 4 potential Trump trials. We already have the Stormy Daniels state charges in New York. We have now federal charges in Florida over, gosh, I already forgot. What is it? Oh, overdue library books. Then we have the Georgia state charges that are pending. The state of Georgia is going to charge Donald Trump with election interference. I mean, that's rich. I have nothing to say about that. What is there to say? And then in Washington, D.C., this will be the real, guaranteed, there's no coming back for Trump from this one. Charges in Washington, in D.C. Circuit Court for January 6th. And Trump will suffer the same fate as all the other January 6ers who have been, locked up indefinitely in D.C. jails. Trump will be sentenced to life in prison for the crime of insurrection. And so, once those charges are brought, which many insiders like Bill Barr, who was in a position to know, Bill Barr is a big never Trump deep state apparatchik. Some of you might be saying, but what are you talking about? That's BS. Bill Barr was appointed by Trump. He's Trump's friend, and even he thinks Trump's bad. It's like, no, Trump is actually that bad at hiring people. He hired a deep state apparatchik with ties to Jeffrey Epstein to be his attorney general. A guy who helped cover up Iran-Contra. A guy whose father gave Jeffrey Epstein his first job. That's how deep the ties between Barr and Epstein go. And so Bill Barr is the worst of the worst. But anyway, he's saying he thinks Trump is going to be charged criminally for January 6th, which makes sense. They charged all of the people who were just there, bumbling around and happened to walk in an open door. You wander inside of an open door and you're there on January 6th. Guess what? They charged you criminally. And so if he's going to get convicted anyway, have it be sooner rather than later. I think the closer the... there's an argument to be made there. Maybe it's better to have to have his conviction come right before Election Day. Then it really sets in and it leaves a big impact and it's kind of shocking to people. And he gets all that time to actually campaign. If Trump is convicted, the earlier Trump is convicted, then his campaign ends right there and he's just sitting in prison, and the best you can hope for is he can, like once a week you get a phone call you can dial out of the prison, and it'll have the watermark in there, like, this call is being made from a federal prison. And so what? He'll get 15 minutes to speak once a week. That'll be his contact with the outside world. So needless to say, this is going to be the most interesting election cycle of my lifetime. It's unclear exactly what will happen, but it's quite clear that a lot of things will indeed happen. The Hunter stuff says to me that they're definitely running Biden again. They're not going to try and get rid of Biden and replace him with another candidate. Hunter was their key to doing that. If the DNC or whoever wanted to get rid of Biden, they would have just cranked up the Hunter stuff. Joe Biden would have stepped aside, then they would have, cleared Hunter's name, and they would have had to, also get rid of Kamala, but which they haven't made any moves to do. So it seems like the Biden-Harris ticket is going to, the band is back together for another 4 years. So they're not going to go changing that. All they're focused on is taking down Trump. So we'll see. Either that will work, it will keep Trump out of the public eye, it'll completely paralyze his campaign, or it will galvanize his supporters, and I think that part's a guarantee. But the question is, will it lead to any other people who maybe were on the fence saying, you know what, this is a bridge too far. You can't just lock up your political opponents in prison. I'm going to have to vote for Trump because I think that they've crossed the Rubicon. I don't know. I don't know how many people who aren't already Trump supporters would feel that way. Are there some? Sure, there's always going to be some people. Are they a significant amount of people? Are they the difference between winning and losing? It's hard to say. Will Trump being in prison, will that drive up turnout? Or will that suppress turnout because Trump will be less present? People won't think about it as much. He won't have his rallies. Will his turnout of his supporters be, depressed? People don't like to feel like they're a loser. They want to feel like they're a winner. And if they feel hopeless, if they feel like Trump is lost, he's been locked away, they're not going to turn out. So, with all that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.